Hello everybody, I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to go through a game between Vladimir Kramnik and S.Lputian. It was played in 1992. Vladimir in this game played the Queen's Gambit. He started with d4, his opponent played knight f6, white played c4, black played e6, white played knight f3, black played d5, and white played knight c3. Now, the normal or the most direct way to reach this position is with d4, d5, c4. Now this is the start of the Queen's Gambit. Now if black captures this pawn, this is known as the Queen's Gambit accepted. The whole idea is that when black captures this pawn, he gives up the center with e4, white gains complete control of the center. If instead black plays e6, this is known as the Queen's Gambit declined, because he didn't accept the pawn. And this is what actually happened in this game that we're playing. This position transposes. So for example, after e6, knight c3, knight f6, and knight f3. And that's the current position we have after these moves. Here black plays bishop e7, white plays bishop f4, black castles kingside, white plays e3, black plays c6, white plays queen c2, black plays knight bd7, and now white plays h3. Now, excuse me, one of the reasons why the Queen's Gambit is so popular for white is that this piece of black's, the bishop on c8, is normally quite a problematic piece. It's very hard to get that piece out, and that gives white quite a long-term advantage in the opening. Now, this move h3 that white played, it's aimed at maybe making a backdoor for the king once he castles kingside. And the other idea is, if this knight should move to h5 attacking our bishop, we can keep this bishop by dropping it back to h2. Black plays a6. Now this looks like a strange move. However, his idea, or the idea that black should be aiming for, is to play the move b5 so that he can get this bishop out. Now, before a6, he couldn't play this move b5, because if he did, he would lose a pawn. White has three pieces that are protecting this square over here. So if he had to move this pawn immediately, white would just take, black would recapture, and then white could recapture, winning the pawn. So a6 is gearing towards maybe playing that move b5. White plays rook d1, black plays h6. Now, in turn, white played h3, now black is playing h6. However, this move is not so great, and you'll see later on in one of the sub-variations why this move is not great. A much better way for black to play would have been to carry on by playing b5. One way that white could continue here is pawn takes d5, c takes d5, rook c1, bishop b7, and let's say for example developing the bishop to d3. Black plays rook c8, and black's doing fine. He's got an open file for his rook. The bishop has been developed, even though he is still slightly blocked by these pawns. This would have been a much better way for black to play. So after h6, white played a3. Now, again, this is another one of the smaller moves, but again, this one's very good. Okay, and we're going to see in this game why this is a good move. Black plays d takes c5, White develops his bishop and takes a pawn on c4. Black plays knight d5. Now with this move, black is attacking the bishop and the knight. And he's hoping, because often we don't like giving away our bishops, so he's hoping that the bishop drops back to h2 and then he can capture this knight on c3. Now the reason why black wants to do that is when you've got a position where your pieces are very cramped, you want to trade off some of those pieces, because then you've got more squares for your remaining pieces to move. However, white didn't move his bishop back. He just simply castled kingside. Now, white's development is pretty much like the best type of development to aim for. He's got two very good bishops on very good squares. His knights are on their best squares. His rooks are connected. His queen's out, and he's got control of the center. This is all very good. Now, black plays knight takes bishop. He could also have taken the knight on c3. This is probably would have been black's best way to play. Again, like I said, if you're cramped, you want to try and swap off pieces. So let's say, for example, queen takes, knight b6, e4 to stop the knight from going to d5. Knight captures bishop, and queen takes knight. Now here, white's still got a very good position. He's got good central control with his pawns. They're controlling all these lowly squares. His bishop is very, very strong, and his queen's very strong, also the rook and the knight. But again, black has traded off some pieces, so that will give his remaining pieces more room to maneuver. So after black captured on f4, white recaptured on f4. Now here black played queen c7. Now this turns out to be quite a bad move. He's threatening this pawn, but later on the queen is going to be in a bit of trouble on this line. It's really hard to see because we've got a pawn, a bishop, a knight all in the way. So let's see what happens. A better move than queen c7 would have been knight b6. Now after knight b6, the thing white should be aiming for is not exchanging pieces, because then you release some of the squares for your opponent's cramped pieces. So white would play bishop a2. Now when the knight goes to d5, a nice central square, white would play his bishop to b1. Now this lining up of the bishop behind the queen is known as a battery. Now they're aiming for this square on h7. Now if a queen can get there, it's checkmate. So black would have to play g6. Now white plays knight e5, and now we see why this move h6 was such a bad move. If this pawn was back on h7, it would be defending this pawn on g6. But because it's here on h6, this square over here is a lot weaker and it's not so well defended. And white's idea here would be to take this pawn. So for example, let's say black plays a random move like rook b8. Then white can take this pawn. When black recaptures, the queen takes here. Check. King can only move there and checkmate. Alright. So you notice why this pawn move was such a bad move. So after queen c7, white played knight e5. Black played knight f6. Alright, remember, he should exchange because then it gives his pieces more room to maneuver. Okay. Instead he played knight f6. Bishop moves back to a2. Again he's aiming to line up his bishop here and then along this diagonal over here. Black plays bishop d7. Finally the piece is out, but it's no good because it's still blocked by these pawns. White plays bishop b1. Now we've got this nice battery to this h7 square. All we need to do is get rid of this guy and we can deliver checkmate on h7. Black plays bishop e8. Now this is quite a good defensive move because now when this pawn advances to g6, the bishop is giving extra defense to that square. But now white plays a very, very nice move. He plays d5. Now after d5, if the e pawn captures, we can simply recapture. This pawn can't take because it's pinned to the queen. We would win this queen on c7. If the knight captures on d5, okay, lots of errors, sorry. If the knight captures on d5, we don't take with the rook, which would just gain a piece, okay, because the pawn can't take because it's pinned to the queen. But what we do is we actually just checkmate the king. Very simple. Okay. If instead black plays pawn takes d5, we can now play knight takes d5. Now this looks like, well, doesn't really do anything because queen takes. Now if the bishop captures, he can take a knight. But white has this intermediate move again, where he first plays knight takes bishop check, the king has to move, and then bishop takes queen, and we've won a piece. So this is very strong for white. So after d5, black played rook d8. Now white's got a lot of pressure in the position. Notice how cramped all these pieces of blacks are. They're so cramped. They can't do anything. So when you've got a position like this, you don't want to release the tension immediately. If you can still keep the tension and slightly improve your position, then you should do that. Because imagine being under so much pressure, your position's going to crack. So white played rook f to e1, just getting this rook on a better square, where it's covering this line, and just maintaining the pressure. Black plays king h8, and now white decides to release the pressure by taking on e6. Black plays rook takes d1, rook takes d1, pawn takes e6, knight e4. Now here white wants to get rid of this knight again so that he can deliver checkmate on h7. So black plays g6 to try and block this line for the queen and the bishop. White now plays knight c5 excuse me, threatening this pawn on e6 with a fork. Hope you can all remember the forks. Black plays bishop takes knight. White plays queen takes c5, threatening the rook. The rook moves to g8. And now this bishop, which did this little route, is now going back. So he plays bishop a2, hitting this pawn on e6. Now it's really hard for black to defend this pawn. Okay, if the queen comes off this line, then our queen can penetrate to that square. If black tries bishop f7, white's got this clever little move. He plays queen d6, and when the queen takes, we don't recapture. Again, we've got an intermediate move. Knight takes f7, forking the king and the queen, so the king would have to move, and then we'd capture the queen and we've won a piece. So after bishop a2, instead of defending this pawn, black tried king g7. Now white played bishop takes e6, threatening the rook. Rook moves to f8. And now white plays knight d7. Again attacking the rook and the knight. Black plays knight takes d7. And now white played a very crafty little move. I'll give you guys a second to try and work it out. And the move was rook takes d7. I hope you all got that. Now this is a very nice move because now it forks the king and the queen. So the queen has to, or black has to do something about this rook. If he doesn't, he's going to lose the queen. The queen can't capture, because if she does, the bishop would take, and we're up a queen. If the bishop captures, then the queen goes to e7, check. The king can only move to that square if the king moves. And then we can take the rook, king moves there, and checkmate. And lastly, if the rook moves to f7, white would play queen takes rook, king to h8, and then queen g7 checkmate. That's why after rook d7, S.Lputian in this position resigned. I hope you all enjoyed this game, featuring the Queen's Gambit. Now, can you all tell me, what is the series on Netflix currently called that's got to do with chess? Big hint. See you guys for the next video. Thanks. Bye.